Many actors in the golden age of Hollywood got popular, but not all deserved that. Many got fame just because of their looks or media stunts. Many critics have talked about these 25 actors who were famous but had very little acting skills. Victor Mature. Victor Mature became a star during the 1940s to 50s, despite critics lambasting his wooden delivery and lack of emotional depth. Known for roles in biblical epics like Samson and Delilah and The Robe, Mature's hulking physique and smoldering looks made him a studio favorite for spectacle-driven films. Critics argued he relied on his matinee idol status rather than talent. Even Mature joked, "I'm no actor, and I've got 64 films to prove it." His fame stemmed from luck and timing. Post-White Flu audiences craved escapism, and his imposing presence suited Technicolor extravaganzas. Studios marketed him as a larger-than-life figure, overshadowing his stiff line readings. While peers like Marlon Brando embraced method acting, Mature thrived in an era where visual grandeur and studio hype trumped nuanced performances. Roy Rogers. Roy Rogers, the king of the cowboys, became a 1940s to 50s icon through his singing cowboy persona, epitomizing wholesome Americana. Known for films like Under Western Stars and his loyal horse Trigger, Rogers' charm and musical talent overshadowed his rudimentary acting skills. Critics dismissed his performances as stiff and one-note, but audiences adored his cheerful demeanor and family-friendly image. His fame stemmed from timing. Post-Wide's audiences craved moral simplicity, and Rogers' clean-cut roles offered escapism. Studios capitalized on his marketability, pairing him with wife Dale Evans for a relatable, all-American brand. While contemporaries like John Wayne leaned into dramatic westerns, Rogers thrived in B-movies and TV, where his singing and affable presence outweighed the need for depth. His legacy endures as a cultural symbol of mid-century optimism, proving that charisma and persona could eclipse artistic rigor. Esther Williams. Esther Williams, MGM's Million Dollar Mermaid, starred in 1940s to 50s aquatic musicals like Bathing Beauty and Million Dollar Mermaid, where her synchronized swimming, not acting, took center stage. A former competitive swimmer, Williams was cast for her athleticism, with films built around elaborate water ballets. Critics argued her line deliveries were flat and emotionally detached, but her Technicolor spectacles dazzled audiences. MGM marketed her as a novelty act, leveraging her unique skills to create a genre dubbed aqua musicals. Williams's fame relied on studio ingenuity. Her movies were visual feats, combining Yuyang choreography with lavish sets. While she lacked the dramatic range of peers like Gene Kelly, her aquatic artistry filled theaters. In an era of cinematic experimentation, Williams's blend of sport and glamour made her a star, proving that niche talent and studio hype could override critical scrutiny. Anita Ekberg. Although she became an international sex symbol, Anita Ekberg's acting was heavily limited by her strong accent and a somewhat stiff presence on screen. Famous for roles like Sylvia in La Dolce Vita, Ekberg was visually mesmerizing, but often failed to deliver dialogue convincingly. Her performances tended to lack emotional depth, partly due to language barriers and partly due to her reliance on physical appeal rather than nuanced acting. Directors cast her for visual impact rather than dramatic talent, resulting in fame that hinged more on iconic imagery than artistic acclaim. Pat Boone. Primarily recognized as a singer, Pat Boone's transition to acting was met with skepticism due to his notably stiff and monotonous performances. Boone rarely displayed emotional range or natural dialogue delivery, often appearing uncomfortable or out of place in dramatic scenes. His films typically capitalized on his musical fame, rather than acting ability, featuring him prominently singing or performing. Critics noted Boone's limited ability to convincingly portray complex characters or evoke genuine emotion, marking him as a popular yet critically limited actor. John Agar. John Agar's acting career was characterized by notably dull and uninspired performances. Frequently criticized for his wooden dialogue delivery and limited emotional expression, Agar often struggled to convincingly portray nuanced roles. His early career success was significantly bolstered by connections and personal charm rather than demonstrated talent. Many of his film appearances were memorable for reasons unrelated to his performance quality. Despite this consistent criticism, Agar maintained a steady acting career, highlighting how personal appeal and connections often overshadowed genuine dramatic skill during Hollywood's golden age. Tab Hunter. Tab Hunter, the 1950s blonde heartthrob, rose to fame with roles in Battlecry and Damn Yankees, though critics panned his wooden performances. His boyish looks and studio-engineered all-American image, promoted through teen magazines and pinups, catapulted him to stardom. Warner Brothers prioritized his marketability over acting chops, casting him in melodramas targeting teenage girls. Hunter's limited range was evident in films like The Pleasure of His Company, where his stiff delivery contrasted with seasoned co-stars. However, his fame thrived on post-war teen culture's obsession with matinee idols. Off-screen, Hunter's closeted sexuality added complexity to his persona, though studios suppressed it to maintain his squeaky clean image. While his acting never earned acclaim, Hunter's legacy lies in embodying 1950s idealism, a product of studio machinery and audience demand for escapist eye candy. Troy Donahue. Troy Donahue epitomized the 1950s-60s teen idol, starring in shallow melodramas like A Summer Place and Perish. With his chiseled features and tousled hair, Warner Brothers typecast him as the brooding romantic lead, despite critics deriding his lifeless performances. Films like Susan Slade highlighted his limited emotional range, yet his chemistry with co-stars like Sandra Dee resonated with adolescent audiences. Donahue's fame was a studio concoction. Warner's aggressively marketed him as a dreamboat, capitalizing on the era's youth-driven box office. However, his career faltered as method actors like James Dean redefined Hollywood realism. By the 1970s, Donahue became a camp icon, his earlier roles mocked for their artifice. Yet his initial success underscores how studios weaponized looks and typecasting to cater to fleeting trends, prioritizing profit over artistry. Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy, World War II's most decorated soldier, transitioned to acting in westerns like The Red Badge of Courage and To Hell and Back, where he played himself. Critics deemed his performances wooden and emotionally distant, but audiences revered his real-life heroism. Studios exploited his war hero status, casting him in roles that mirrored his battlefield valor. Murphy's lack of training showed in stiff deliveries, yet his authenticity in combat scenes lent credibility. Films like To Hell and Back blurred the line between actor and icon, appealing to post-war patriotism. While peers like Marlon Brando embraced method acting, Murphy's fame relied on his legend, not craft. His later career dwindled as audiences sought complexity, but Murphy remains a symbol of Hollywood's ability to monetize heroism, proving that legacy and timing can outweigh talent. Rory Calhoun. Rory Calhoun carved a niche as a B-movie Western star in the 1940s to 50s, appearing in over 80 films like The Silver Whip and River of No Return. Critics dismissed his acting as serviceable but uninspired, often overshadowed by his rugged handsomeness and stoic demeanor. Calhoun thrived in an era when Hollywood churned out low-budget westerns for undemanding audiences, his charm and physicality suiting roles that prioritized action over depth. His early life, marked by a prison stint and reinvention as a rodeo rider, added a layer of authenticity to his tough guy persona, which studios exploited. While peers like Gary Cooper balanced grit with emotional nuance, Calhoun's appeal lay in his reliability as a genre workhorse. Luck played a role too. The post-war Western boom created demand for actors who could ride horses and deliver lines without fuss. By the 1960s, He transitioned to TV, cementing his legacy as a prolific but unpretentious star. Calhoun's career underscores how Hollywood's appetite for genre filler could sustain actors whose charisma outweighed their artistic ambition. Jeff Chandler. Jeff Chandler rose to fame in 1950s action films like Broken Arrow and Taza, Son of Cochise, often playing stoic, morally rigid heroes. Despite his deep baritone voice and imposing presence, critics found his performances one-note, lacking the emotional complexity of contemporaries such as Burt Lancaster. Chandler's fame hinged on typecasting. Studios capitalized on his authoritative aura, casting him in roles that required physicality over subtlety. An Oscar nomination for Broken Arrow highlighted Hollywood's tokenism more than his acting chops. His career was buoyed by luck. The post-war surge in Technicolor epics demanded actors who could embody larger-than-life figures, and Chandler's striking looks fit the bill. Tragically, his premature death in 1961 cut short any chance of reinvention. While never acclaimed as a great actor, Chandler's success reveals how mid-century Hollywood prized masculine archetypes and visual grandeur, often at the expense of nuanced performance. John Wayne. John Wayne, the face of American westerns, was routinely criticized for his monotonous delivery and limited range. Critics like Pauline Kael called him a personality, not an actor. Yet his career spanned 50-plus years. Wayne's fame came from typecasting. His rugged, all-American persona resonated with mid-20th century ideals of masculinity. Films like Stagecoach and The Searchers leveraged his stoic image, not his acting chops. Luck played a role too. His partnership with Ford and Republic Pictures' aggressive promotion turned him into a cultural symbol. Wayne's lack of subtlety was overlooked because audiences saw him as the embodiment of patriotism and frontier values. Not a thespian. His later Oscar for True Grit was seen as a Lifetime Achievement Award, cementing his fame despite artistic limitations. Zsa Zsa Gabor. Zsa Zsa Gabor, more socialite than actress, built a career on charm and controversy rather than talent. Critics dismissed her as a professional celebrity after roles in forgettable films like Moulin Rouge and Queen of Outer Space. Her exaggerated accent, glamorous persona, and tabloid antics kept her in the spotlight. Gabor's fame was pure luck. She arrived in Hollywood as a Hungarian émigré, with no training but mastered self-promotion, marrying rich men and appearing on talk shows. Studios cast her for camp value, not acting skill, and critics accused her of playing herself in every role. In an era obsessed with old Hollywood glamour, her caricature of elegance, combined with shrewd media manipulation, made her iconic, proving fame doesn't require talent. George Raft. George Raft became synonymous with 1930s to 40s gangster films like Scarface and Each Dawn I Die, but critics derided his limited range and reliance on typecasting. His real-life ties to organized crime, he socialized with mobsters like Bugsy Siegel, lent credibility to his roles, but stifled his versatility. Raft's stiff delivery and repetitive tough guy shtick contrasted sharply with peers like James Cagney, who infused grit with vulnerability. Yet his fame endured through sheer image. Studios marketed him as the embodiment of streetwise menace, a persona audiences embraced. Bad luck also shaped his career. He notoriously turned down roles in High Sierra and The Maltese Falcon, which catapulted Humphrey Bogart to stardom. By the 1950s, Raft became a self-parody, appearing in campy noirs like Some Like It Hot. His legacy is a cautionary tale of how Hollywood's obsession with typecasting and sensationalism can trap actors in diminishing niches, even as their personas remain iconic. Robert Taylor. Robert Taylor, dubbed MGM's Man with the Perfect Profile, epitomized 1930s to 40s matinee idol glamour. Films like Camille and Ivanhoe showcased his striking looks, but critics lambasted his performances as wooden and emotionally vacant. Studio head Louis B. Mayer prioritized Taylor's appearance over his talent, casting him in roles designed to highlight his beauty, such as the titular Knights of the Round Table. His deep, resonant voice and aristocratic bearing suited historical epics, yet he struggled in nuanced dramas, often overshadowed by co-stars like Greta Garbo. Taylor's fame was a product of MGM's star-making machinery, which marketed him as the idealized leading man during Hollywood's golden age. While lacking the depth of Spencer Tracy or Clark Gable, he thrived in an era that equated physical perfection with star power. His later career transitioned to TV, but he remains a symbol of how studio glamorization could eclipse artistic growth, proving that beauty alone could sustain a career. Rhonda Fleming. Rhonda Fleming, nicknamed the Queen of Technicolor, dazzled in 1940s to 50s films like Spellbound and Out of the Past, her fiery red hair and vivid features lighting up the screen. Critics, however, dismissed her as a human Technicolor test strip, arguing her acting lacked depth compared to peers like Lauren Bacall. Fleming's roles often required little beyond radiant glamour, as seen in The Spiral Staircase and Gunfight at the OK Corral, where she served as visual counterpoint to male leads. MGM leveraged her striking looks to enhance their lavish productions, prioritizing her aesthetic appeal over character development. Her fame relied on Hollywood's post-war obsession with visual spectacle. Audiences flocked to her films for escapism, not dramatic heft. Fleming later embraced TV and stage work, but her legacy rests on her status as a Technicolor icon, a reminder of an era when studios commodified beauty, using advancements in film technology to mask artistic limitations. Jayne Mansfield. Jayne Mansfield, the quintessential 1950s blonde bombshell, leveraged her hypersexualized image and shrewd self-promotion to become a Hollywood icon, despite critics dismissing her as a talentless caricature. Often compared to Marilyn Monroe, Mansfield lacked Monroe's vulnerability or comedic timing, but compensated with audacious camp and a relentless pursuit of the spotlight. Films like The Girl Can't Help It and Will Success, Spoil Rockhunter, showcased her as a walking punchline, a buxom, breathy naif, whose roles leaned into her persona as a dumb blonde. Critics derided her acting as one-dimensional, but audiences adored her for embodying post-war America's fascination with excess and kitsch. Mansfield's fame relied on spectacle. She staged photo ops with live cheetahs, wore skin-tight gowns, and famously posed in a gold lame bikini, ensuring she remained tabloid fodder. Studios capitalized on her notoriety, casting her in roles that required little beyond pouting and pratfalls. Her tragic decline, marked by B-movies and tabloid scandals, underscored the fleeting nature of fame built on persona alone. Yet Mansfield's legacy endures as a proto-reality star, a pioneer in weaponizing celebrity culture. She proved that in Hollywood, ambition and audacity could eclipse talent, paving the way for future icons who prioritized image over craft. Steve Reeves. Steve Reeves, a former Mr. Universe, became the face of 1950s to 60s sword and sandal epics, epitomizing the muscle-bound hero in films like Hercules and Hercules Unchained. With a physique sculpted for the screen, Reeves was cast for his brawn, not his acting chops. Critics mocked his stiff delivery and limited emotional range, but audiences flocked to see his mythic strength in action. His career was a product of post-war Europe's booming low-budget film industry, where Italian directors like Pietro Francisci prioritized spectacle over substance. Reeves's stoic demeanor and statuesque presence suited the genre's demands. He was less an actor than a living embodiment of classical idealism. Luck played a role. The success of Hercules spawned a wave of peplum films, and Reeves's name became synonymous with the genre. While contemporaries like Charlton Heston balanced physicality with gravitas, Reeves' appeal was purely visceral. His influence, however, is undeniable. He laid the groundwork for later action stars like Arnold Schwarzenegger, proving that a chiseled physique could anchor a career. Reeves's legacy resides in the margins of Hollywood history, a reminder that cinematic escapism often thrives on simplicity, where muscles speak louder than monologues. Van Johnson. Van Johnson, MGM's boy next door of the 1940s to 50s, charmed audiences with his freckled grin and affable persona, despite critics labeling him a lightweight actor. Films like A Guy Named Joe and 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, 1944, capitalized on his everyman appeal, positioning him as the relatable hero during World War II's patriotic fervor. Johnson's acting was often deemed superficial. His performances in musicals and comedies lacked the intensity of Brando or the wit of Cary Grant. Yet his fame soared precisely because he embodied post-war optimism, wholesome, unthreatening, and steadfast. MGM's star machine protected him, avoiding complex roles that might expose his limitations. Johnson's red hair and accidental stardom added to his mythos as a lucky charm. By the 1960s, his career waned as method acting reshaped Hollywood, but Johnson remained a nostalgia icon. His career illustrates how studios manufactured stars to reflect cultural ideals, prioritizing likability over artistry, a testament to an era when charm alone could sustain a leading man. Mamie Van Doren. Mamie Van Doren emerged in the 1950s as one of Hollywood's quintessential blonde bombshells, a deliberate studio rival to Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield. Known for her platinum hair, hourglass figure, and sultry persona, Van Doren's career was built on her ability to embody the era's fixation on hyper-feminine sexuality. Films like Untamed Youth and High School Confidential positioned her as a rebellious bad girl, often playing vixens or gold diggers in B-movies that prioritized titillation over storytelling. Critics dismissed her acting as cartoonish, citing her exaggerated delivery and lack of emotional nuance. Van Doren herself admitted that her roles required little beyond wiggling her hips and batting her eyelashes. Studios capitalized on her image, marketing her as a campy sex symbol in an era when teen drive-in culture thrived on lowbrow entertainment. Her fame was less about talent than timing. The 1950s craved escapism, and Van Doren's persona, a mix of innocence and provocation, catered to adolescent fantasies. While Monroe leveraged vulnerability to elevate her roles, Van Doren leaned into parody, becoming a self-aware icon of kitsch. Her later career in nightclubs and reality TV underscored her knack for self-promotion, proving that in Hollywood, a marketable gimmick could outlast artistic ambition. John Derek. John Derek began his career as a strikingly handsome leading man in 1940s to 50s, films like Knock on Any Door and All the King's Men. But critics quickly labeled him a wooden actor reliant on his looks. With his chiseled jawline and brooding gaze, Derek was cast as the tortured romantic hero. Yet his performances lacked depth. Directors often framed him in static, glamorous close-ups to mask his stiff delivery, as seen in The Adventures of Haji Baba. By the 1960s, frustrated by typecasting, Derek shifted to directing, where he gained notoriety for showcasing his wives in exploitative films like Fantasies. His acting career suffered from his limited range. Roles in swashbucklers and westerns required little beyond physical presence. Critics argued he acted with his cheekbones, prioritizing pose over performance. Derek's later reputation as a Svengali-like figure, obsessed with crafting eroticized female personas, overshadowed his early fame. His trajectory highlights Hollywood's willingness to prioritize aesthetics over talent, as well as the pitfalls of clinging to fading matinee idol status in a changing industry. Lex Barker. Lex Barker inherited the Tarzan mantle from Johnny Weissmuller in the late 1940s, starring in 5 jungle adventures that capitalized on his athletic physique and aristocratic bearing. Films like Tarzan's Magic Fountain highlighted his sculpted body, but exposed his flatline delivery and lack of emotional connection. Critics derided him as a talking statue, arguing he lacked Weissmuller's primal grit or charisma. Barker's post-Tarzan career leaned on his looks, with roles in European sandal and sword epics, where his stoic demeanor suited mythic heroes. His acting was often overshadowed by his off-screen persona as a globe-trotting playboy, married to stars like Arlene Dahl and Lana Turner. Barker's fame relied on the Tarzan franchise's enduring appeal and Europe's appetite for American beefcake in low-budget spectacles. While he brought physical credibility to action roles, his performances lacked nuance, reducing characters to archetypes. Barker's legacy is one of Hollywood's persistent contradictions. An actor celebrated for embodying primal masculinity on screen, yet forever constrained by the limitations of his own shallow craft. Deborah Paget. Deborah Paget's career in the 1950s was defined by her ethereal beauty and typecasting in exoticized roles, from Native American maidens to Middle Eastern dancers. With her delicate features and sinuous dance moves, Paget became a fixture in Technicolor spectacles, though critics dismissed her as a human prop in films more interested in visuals than storytelling. Her performances in The Ten Commandments and Love Me Tender were criticized for their wooden delivery, with director Fritz Lang reportedly exasperated by her lack of range during The Indian Tomb. Paget's fame hinged on her ability to personify the male gaze's fantasy. Innocent, yet sensual, often clad in revealing costumes. Studios marketed her as a decorative element in lavish productions, a strategy that limited her to one-dimensional roles. By the 1960s, disillusioned with Hollywood, she retired early, later calling her career a beautiful prison. Paget's story reflects an era when actresses were valued more for their aesthetics than artistry, their careers dictated by patriarchal studio systems. Fernando Lamas. Fernando Lamas, the Argentine-born Latin lover of 1950s Hollywood, built a career on smoldering glances and a thick accent, playing suave romantics in films like The Merry Widow and Dangerous When Wet. Critics dismissed his acting as a caricature of Latin machismo, reliant on cliched gestures and exaggerated charm. MGM typecast him as the passionate foreigner opposite stars, like Esther Williams, but his roles rarely required emotional depth. Lamas leaned into his persona, quipping, "I don't act, I react," yet his performances often felt stiff, especially in dramatic scenes. By the 1960s, he transitioned to TV and directing, where his flair for melodrama found better footing. His later reputation as a kitschy icon and father to Lorenzo Lamas overshadowed his film work. Lamas's career underscores Hollywood's reductive treatment of ethnic actors, reducing them to exotic stereotypes. His fame relied on an era that conflated accent with authenticity, proving that charisma and typecasting could sustain a career even as they stifled growth. Alan Ladd. Alan Ladd's stoic intensity made him a star in This Gun for Hire and Shane, but critics often found his performances emotionally remote. His short stature and whispery voice contrasted with traditional leading men, yet directors like George Stevens capitalized on his enigmatic presence. In Shane, Ladd's restrained delivery worked for the titular loner, but in dramas like The Great Gatsby, his aloofness felt hollow. Critics accused him of sleepwalking through roles, relying on his icy blue eyes and quiet menace to compensate for limited range. Ladd's fame was rooted in post-war America's fascination with anti-heroes. His characters were brooding outsiders, a persona studios carefully cultivated. Personal insecurities and typecasting plagued his career. By the 1960s, he struggled with alcoholism and faded from prominence. Ladd's legacy endures as a study in contrasts, a star whose minimalist style resonated with audiences but left critics wanting more, proving that screen presence alone could forge an icon, even if it couldn't silence artistic doubts.